And let's continue with the 8th chapter of The Darkangel by Meredith and Pierce. It's called Quest and Flight. Ariel escaped from the Darkangel's castle, but he began to chase her. He bit her on the throat, and she was saved by a lion, although she passed out from bleeding from her throat. So what will happen? We'll find out as we pick up at the paragraph break. When she awoke, she was lying on the sand. The sun was hot on her face, her throat ached. There was an intermittent sound of splashing over to her left. She listened to it, not wanting yet to open her eyes. She was just beginning to drift into a dream when a few drops of water sprinkled her cheek. She heard the plash of water again, and in a moment more drops fell. She blinked and opened her eyes. The lion sat on the sand beside her, shaking water from one great paw onto her face. "Ah, you are awake, child," he said. His voice was very quiet and deep. "How do you feel? Can you rise?" "I don't know," she said. "I feel weak." The lion nodded. "That is to be expected. The bite of an Icarus is no mean thing. Come, you must try to sit up. Your wound must be attended to." Ariel pulled herself upright into a sitting position. For a moment the sky tilted crazily and threatened to fall. She rested her head on her knees. Only now did she begin to wonder that she was not dead, that the lion had rescued her from the vampire, and that he spoke with a human manner and voice. She rested her head on her knees. She knew that there was water nearby. She reached out her hand and felt wet sand, then liquid. She dipped her hand into the water, brought her cupped palm to her lips, and drank a little, but swallowing was painful, difficult. She bathed her neck. The wound burned at the touch of water, but she felt the pain ease. She drank again. The water was warm and faint blue-green in color. Its taste reminded her vaguely of cress, and it smelled of life. She raised her head from her knees a bit and saw that she was sitting beside a tiny pool, hardly more than a puddle in the sand. A sprinkling of miniature water plants dotted the surface, and among them a handful of tiny frogs chirping. She saw 4 snails with spiral shells on the bottom and 2 at the water's edge. "There," said the lion. "Does that help the hurt?" Ariel started. He sat so unobtrusively she had almost forgotten him. "Yes," she said weakly, "much." "Strain some of the floating plants out of the water with your hand and plaster them to the wound," he instructed. "They will help it more than just the water." Ariel did so. The little flecks of green were surprisingly pungent, and when she pressed them to her neck, their oily coating seeped into the wound with a soothing warmth. Gradually the cold, numbing ache began to abate. She felt giddy at times, almost faint, but no more in pain. After a time she realized she was hungry, and reached without thinking into her pouch for food. She remembered the lion suddenly and glanced at him. "Are you hungry?" she inquired timidly. "Would you like something to eat?" Despite his reserved and gentle manner, she felt the lingering fear of being leapt upon and devoured. The lion bowed his head with consummate grace and replied, "I should be honored." She fumbled in the little bag, rejecting first the rose pear and then the stalk of sweet cane that came to hand. At last she found something suitable, a boiled crayfish. She held it out to him timorously, half afraid he would snap it up in his great jaws, and her hand along with it. Instead, he bent his head and took it carefully. Then, reclining, he placed the crustacean between his paws and proceeded to peel it with a delicacy and dignity she could scarce believe. She felt foolish, ill-mannered, nibbling on the small globe of cheese she had taken for herself. "Would you like something else?" she asked quickly when he was done. "Thank you, daughter, no," he said graciously. "You must save the rest for yourself." Ariel saw now that he had taken her first offering not from hunger, but from courtesy. At least, she was glad to see, he was not ravenous. She nibbled her cheese and felt very worn. "You saved me from the vampire," she said at last. "Why?" "It is my duty to protect all creatures within my borders, child," the great cat replied. "And I am not particularly fond of Ikari." "I never saw you before he came," said Ariel. "Were you nearby all the while?" "Oh, no, daughter, no. I had to come from a great distance to find you." "To find me?" said Ariel. Her head was feeling very heavy. She rested it in her hand. "You knew that I was coming?" The lion nodded. "A white heron told me you would be crossing my south border about dawn. I had already been patrolling for some hours before I spotted you. A white heron, murmured Ariel. Wind on the water. Perhaps she was called so once, the lion said, but when she came to me, she said her name was Wing on the Wind. Ariel said nothing. Her eyelids drooped, her stomach lay full in her and slightly queasy. She felt restless and drowsy at once. The sky tilted slowly off to the left. Lie back in the sand, child, the lion was saying. His voice sounded far, a very long way away. You are fainting. Ariel lay back in the sand. The world steadied a little. I must find the star horse, she muttered. The Equestral. The lion bent over her. Daughter, I know your quest, he said. The white heron told me, but you have lost much blood to this wound, and will be a while yet healing. I will give you into the hands of the desert folk, who will tend you until you are fit to travel again. Ariel shook her head and muttered something. She did not want to wait. There was not time. It would not be many months before the vampire took another bride, his final bride. She must find the Star Horse and return with him to the Darrow before that. But she found herself too weak to make protest to the lion. Her eyes slid shut, and she slipped into a daze. Later she half woke, or perhaps it was a dream of strange music played on woodwinds and tambours, and of a long train of dark people with banners and walking sticks, and of their leader, a tall woman, conferring with the lion. Ariel could not hear what they were saying, though now and again they glanced back at her. The lion and the woman parted. Ariel watched him disappear over the dunes. The dark people came and stood about her. Then, lifting her onto a litter, they quietly bore her away. And that is the end of Chapter 8.